Good afternoon and welcome into the Senate Government Operations Committee meeting of Friday, April 24th, 2026. Today, we're going to take a look at H67, an act relating to legislative operations and government accountability. Do you have any time constraints? Like you got to be somewhere at a certain time?
I have to be back at 2 to run an interview.
Oh, we'll be done well before then. I hope. So let's go to the screen first and bring in William Clark from the National Conference of State Legislatures and Carrington Skinner, also from NCSL. Welcome in, guys, and love to hear what you have to say.
Great, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I was hoping to share a presentation. Can I? Here we go, perfect. All right. Can you all see my presentation?
We can see that you're sharing. Yes, now we can.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so again, thank you very much for having us. My name is William Clark with the National Conference of State Legislatures, and today I'm going to be presenting to you on state legislative oversight tools generally, and then my colleague Carrington will be presenting on performance management and getting a little bit deeper into those mechanisms. My summary today is going to be looking just again at oversight in a general sense, and I'm going to get into kind of 3 major oversight mechanisms, including sunset reviews, administrative rule review, and then performance audit and program evaluation. So in general, though, when we're talking about legislative oversight, all of these different activities are really getting at kind of several key components. So you're looking to see, is policy following legislative intent? Is it effective? Is it enabling good stewardship of taxpayer dollars? And then given those 3 things, is it in need of modification or elimination? Another way to look at this is that the work you all do during session, you pass laws, those get codified, and they typically will go to an executive branch agency who will implement them in terms of programs and services. And again, looking at oversight and the intent of oversight, it's really, is the law that you passed, is it being implemented in the way that you wish it was? There are various tools you have at your disposal to determine this. Primarily, your work in germane committees and standing committees, that is the primary work of legislative oversight, because that's when you have a lot of opportunity to work with state agency personnel, directors, the public, and to work with each other. And then you can also direct agencies to conduct studies and analysis and then review those as well in committee and when you're deliberating legislation. Beyond that, you have various other tools at other stages of the policy process. So you have sunset and sunrise processes, administrative rules review, and evaluation and audit, which I'm going to get into next. Sunset reviews, Vermont had a process, but these processes were first created in Colorado in the 70s, and a lot of other states began using them. 44 states at any given point in time were using these processes. And as you're probably well aware, they automatically terminate boards, agencies, and commissions unless the legislature takes action to reinstate them. So again, these were implemented in the 70s when legislatures perhaps had less power relative to the executive branch. And so as time has moved on, as legislatures have professionalized, gotten more staff and more resources, legislatures began looking at other tools. But there are still at least 10 states that heavily use these tools, and then many other states that use them in selective instances, for example, with a specific bill. Administrative rules review is a tool that is being, I think, more widely considered and adopted by states. And so these tools review regulations, standards, and policies that are issued by executive agencies when they're implementing statutory provisions. So currently there are 43 states that have some kind of authority to review administrative rules review. And the review often is around the constitutionality of a rule and also whether or not that rule adheres with legislative intent. So as opposed to a sunset or a sunrise process, which is really at the end or beginning of a program, this is really in the middle of a program. So as it is adopting rules to conduct policy, this gives you all a chance to review their work. An administrative rules review process is really on a spectrum. So there are some states that only have the authority to review administrative rules. So if they have any kind of an issue with the rule, they would need to work with the governor or the agency itself or pass a law to modify the statute. In the middle, you have the authority by some legislatures to halt or pause rules, and they can either do that through a joint resolution or through a special committee. And then on the far end of the spectrum, you have West Virginia, who has the authority to approve all agency rules. There's a special committee, so when an agency wants to pass a rule or regulation, it has to be approved by this legislative body first. I wanted to kind of end my presentation by going into program evaluation and performance audit. So these offices are being increasingly adopted and relied upon by legislatures to get information about programs. But in general, they're there to ensure that public services are being provided effectively, efficiently, economically, and ethically. And there are kind of two main differences between audits and evaluations. Audits are really focused on compliance with the law using established standards, whereas evaluations are really looking at effectiveness. So most audits, especially financial audits and compliance audits, they're using financial accuracy and internal controls, whereas evaluations are really looking at outcomes and impact. A really important distinction amongst programs is who selects the director of these programs. So 36 of these offices are legislatively appointed, 5 executive branch, and then 25 independently elected, and there are some states that have 2 different offices. Another important component is who these offices report to. So 76%, the vast majority report to a joint legislative committee, usually an audit committee, and then the others report either to legislative leadership or some sort of mixture of both. And generally, these offices are producing reports. You've likely seen these from your own auditor or other states, performance audits, program evaluations, policy analyses, but these offices can also conduct compliance audits, IT and technology reviews, which are becoming increasingly popular, and then short-term policy research for members or committees and various other reports. And also, a lot of these offices are putting this information online, making it more accessible to the legislature and the public. So this is an example from Washington, their JLARC. They have a number of indicators that they post in a briefing report on a regular basis. They also post summaries of their audits and the full audit reports. And one other thing I wanted to highlight is one of the benefits of a legislative program evaluation office or a performance audit shop is the legislature really gets to direct their work. So you can see here in this table, this is a biennial work plan for JLARC. You can see all these different audits, but on that far right column, the view study mandate, that is the legislation that directed the office to produce that report. So it really gives the legislature a lot of control over that oversight activity. So that concludes my remarks. I've got a couple of resources you can look at here related to legislative oversight, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Carrington.
Great. Thank you, Will, and thank you to the chair and members of the committee for having us here today. I'm going to just do a very quick overview, coming at oversight from a slightly different angle than what Will's team talks about, which are performance, evidence, and how data are being used in this type of work. So I'm just going to start with a very broad overview of that. We'll talk about how performance is being measured across the states, and then think about a few state examples. So my team, the Center for Results-Driven Governing, focuses on a question that a lot of the states are really grappling with, which is how to bring the best available data and evidence into state policymaking to inform decision-making. That can look very different from state to state and can include things like performance measurement, program evaluation, which Will mentioned, and a lot of other tools and strategies. But one of the key ways that we talk about on our team that states are bringing information into this process is through measuring performance. Virtually every state does it in some form or fashion. As you can see here, 36 states and DC have statutory requirements for collecting performance information. These are often, but not always, embedded into a state's budgeting process. And so you'll see that when we walk through a few examples here. I wanted to touch on just a few common features and considerations as we walk through those state examples. States are really thinking about how to get access to timely, reliable data, and so that's a key area of focus for states. As part of the big picture, states are also embedding this work into larger performance management, strategic planning themes. There's also a role for evidence that a lot of states are focusing on how to bring rigorous information and randomized controlled trials and other sorts of studies into this process. States are also building structures to help bridge information gaps across branches and to help bring everything together in one place. And finally, states are thinking a lot about how to report and communicate this information. So this is really where it enters the decision-making process and becomes something that can be viewed by decision makers and the public. So as part of this work, as I mentioned, some states have been formalizing cross-branch collaboration to support this work. For example, Utah passed legislation recently to formalize cooperation between the governor's office and the Office of the Legislative Fiscal Analyst to really review, help develop, and approve performance measures. And that the statute there includes really defined roles for both offices in that process. Also wanted to mention New Mexico. Their Legislative Finance Committee has developed what they call a Legislating for Results framework that's based on that state's Accountability in Government Act, really looking to track performance data throughout its life cycle, from identifying priority areas all the way down to monitoring outcomes. And one of the ways that they do that is through what are called agency report cards, which the committee produces to provide program ratings and analysis of performance data for state agencies. These are publicly available online and reported and updated regularly, usually on a quarterly basis. And you can see here on the screen, this is an example from the Department of Transportation's report from earlier this year. As I mentioned, many states have also been building capacity to facilitate data sharing, build data infrastructure to really help get access to timely, reliable, specific data to help with this process. The Indiana Management Performance Hub, for example, supports the work in integrating a lot of this data. It does this through maintaining the state's data hub, as well as a number of interactive data dashboards with visuals like the one that you can see on your screen. I also mentioned that some states have been setting standards for collecting and reporting on the level of evidence out there that supports how effective programs and practices are. Colorado, for example, developed a system to incorporate evidence-based decision-making into the state's budget process directly through developing evidence designation categories. So basically, these 5 categories are assigned to programs and practices that are then shared by the agencies with the Joint Budget Committee staff. And they're really designed to help legislators prioritize funding decisions. And just to give you an example, here are a couple of other states that have also developed their own evidence scales. North Carolina is there on the left and Rhode Island on the right. State agencies are often asked to use this evidence information along with other performance metrics and other data in budget requests. One topic that's come up a lot in the last year has been how to promote government efficiency and effectiveness. States have been creating new task forces, legislative committees, or other offices to manage this work. There are a few examples there on your screen. Sometimes this work has included conducting program evaluations, adding other requirements for tracking and reporting of performance, and also finding ways to incorporate new technology to improve government service delivery. Also wanted to mention a few pieces of legislation that have been enacted since earlier this year that are really related to requirements for evidence and evaluation. These 3 bills are all a little bit different, but they all focus on upfront planning for evaluation and performance information to be collected. For example, the New Mexico legislation requires what are called accountability and evaluation plans for recipients from that grant fund. And these plans must include things like goals, objectives, expected outcomes, as well as performance measures, monitoring plans, and different types of evidence information. So that's a very quick overview of how states are using performance information and evidence to support decision-making. Here are a few resources that we've produced, but also others that come from outside of NCSL. We'd be happy to point you to other resources if you're interested. Also want to plug, Will and I are running a session at this year's Legislative Summit in Chicago, if you're going to be there, called Modern Oversight Tools in Action. We'd love to see you there. We're going to be talking about a lot of these issues, so please join us if you can. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Senator, first of all, thank you very much, Carrington and Will. Excellent job. And Senator Clarkson has a question.
Very speedy. Hi, Allison Clarkson. Didn't have a chance to meet you. Sorry, I was late. I'm just curious how Vermont rates in terms of our performance measures and how we, as you look at all the states, do you rate the states in terms of all these measures and how we use them effectively? And if so, how does Vermont rate? Or did you already cover that?
No.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Senator. Thank you very much for your question. We really at NCSL don't rate the states on how they approach these issues differently. We try to capture the breadth of what everybody's doing. I will tell you that virtually every state does it a little bit differently, and that some states are more extensive than others. Some states have been doing this, dating back maybe to the 1960s. Others have just started this process in the last 2 or 3 years. I would say that there's 50 plus examples of how to do this in every state, so they're all a little bit different. And Vermont is also as part of that and looks I guess slightly different than everybody else.
And do you find that this work is consistently improves, or is it totally dependent on who's shepherding it at the moment? Because we had results-based accountability under our former speaker, under Michael Wachowski, and Diane Snell, and we had some very strong efforts in this that kind of got dropped. Do you find it goes ebbs and flows with the leadership, or do you find there's a way to make it consistent and growing over time? I don't know how to ask that question exactly, but you get
Thank you, Senator. That's a great question. I would say that it does ebb and flow over time, depending on who's in either the governor's office or who's in the legislature. We found that a lot of states are trying to counteract that by building structures to kind of outlast administrations. And one of the ways that they're doing that, I mentioned the Utah example, for example, that they really are trying to get both branches to have a permanent role in these processes, to kind of give it a little bit more longevity, I think, than has been previously seen.
Yeah.
Senator Bielowski.
So I recognize that everywhere does it a little bit differently, but I imagine that as you sort of survey, you have found some best practices or things that seem to universally work or universally not work. Can you point to any of those sort of things?
Well, thank you, Senator. That's a great question. We don't really talk about best practices, I guess, at NCSL, but we do see some common features, I think, that some states are looking at. I think one of those, again, is kind of systemizing the processes and defining roles in this process. I think we've talked to some states who I think there was a lack of clarity, I think, about who was collecting this information, who was reporting this information. And so some states have really been looking for ways to make sure that it's clear that who's reporting this, who's reviewing it, when are the deadlines, and those sorts of things. So that definitely has been an area of focus for a lot of states.
And Senator, if I may too, I believe a lot of the examples that Carrington shared too, I think we don't call those best practices, but we definitely highlight those states when we hear from other states who are looking for practices. And so I think New Mexico often turns up as a state that we like to showcase as an example. Colorado itself, kind of getting back to the previous two questions, Colorado has had a process to review performance over time, and they've consistently tried to improve that process. So even though in some ways they have been a leader, they're still consistently trying to develop more formalized processes. And then the manual that Carrington shared from Utah as well, we see as a very positive practice.
Other questions for either William or Carrington? Yes, Senator White.
I would just say thank you both very much. I'm the NCSL coordinator for the Vermont Senate side, so I look forward. I think we may have met Will actually in NCSL Louisville, but maybe I'm mistaken. Hope to see you in Chicago.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you both. Hopefully it's nice weather where you are, and you can enjoy the weekend outside.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Justin Kenny is up next, our Chief Performance Officer from the Agency of Administration. And I think you can help us to sort of determine where we are with this whole process. The bill that we're considering potentially has a short path because there's no appropriation attached to it. Right. So we have to sort of decide what we're going to do. But I don't know whether Senator Clarkson, I was on, and I think Senator Bielowski was certainly in the summer study group. We used to call this committee DAG.
Yeah. Yes.
And I was a member of that for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I think. And it was a good committee. We had constant turnover in it because it wasn't a rather glamorous in other words, there wasn't a money committee, it wasn't really a policy committee, it was just sort of there. Senator Ash was there at the same time, and I found it hard. I co-chaired it with Maida Townsend for a while. Yeah, and it became difficult sometimes to find people that were willing to be on it because it didn't sort of have that oomph that some of the other committees had. Anyway, we had a dashboard at one time. I remember that the public could go and click on it to find out sort of the performance measures that the state had. I don't know whether, to be honest with you, I don't even know if that's still up.
It is.
Well,
Yep. Yes, indeed. Well, yeah, so when Sue Zeller was
Yeah.
transitioning out, I was on GAC for a little bit towards the tail. end.
Okay.
Right, so I remember that well. I think as I think about GAC, I always go back to the original charge of GAC. I have printed out. Always at my desk.
That'd be great to see. Oh, you've got. it.
Yes, and when I read through it, I'm like, there's a lot of really great stuff here that the committee was supposed to do. The committee was not able to do, as you know, because it only met a couple times
Right.
off session, right? So the load of things here, of which there were 11 different things here, was just too much for the committee to actually tackle.
Yeah.
But like the root of what is here in terms of government accountability and making
It's,
the legislature more accountable, there's a lot of really great stuff that was in
Yeah.
there, right? Too much for that group to do. But there was a lot of really great stuff. So I often go back to this to be like, what were they trying to do? What were they not able to do? In terms of the current version of
but
H67,
before you leave
Yeah.
that, may I just ask, what, that on our website, you've got to be somewhere, where did you?
I can send the copy to you.
Would you be kind enough to do that? I mean, I'm sure we
Yeah.
can find it in the archives somewhere, but
Yeah,
if you were willing to send that, I think we should all take a look at that.
yeah, I can send that off to everybody.
Senator Bielski.
So also before we leave the sort of original GACs, it was my first year in this committee that we got rid of GAC. Yes, but I guess I'm wondering from your perspective, what might have made that more functional or more
Yeah.
effective?
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was really only aimed at legislative accountability and not the full picture of
Yes.
are the laws we passed being enacted the way we intended them to be enacted?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
The original charge does include some of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Some of those aspects when you read through it. I think what happened with GAC was there ended up being this tremendous focus on the outcomes report and the indicators.
Yep.
And GAC got wrapped around the action quite a bit around that. And didn't have time to focus on all of these other areas that are included in the original charge, which I think probably lent to that feeling of like, we're not making any progress. We're
Mhm.
talking about indicators, we can't do the work that we want to do, right? It's like, heck of a feeling. But there are pieces in here, right? Whether each agency and department is taking actions to achieve the population level outcomes set forth in VSA 2311, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff in here about program level performance measures, whether they're actually demonstrating results. Like you read this, you're like, yes, this was intended to set up some accountability structures along with Act 186 of 2014 that for a variety of reasons didn't actually happen. Right? I think there was a point of like turnover, the ebb and flow that we were talking about.
Yeah.
It was this big
Diane
motion,
Stein.
Diane Stelling, resulting in
Diane,
accountability.
yeah.
And now it's like, who knows about RBA anymore?
Okay, well, I do.
Yeah, well, I do,
You do.
right? But there was like a lack of system and discipline, which is one thing that concerns me about the pilot group too, is like, I always think like accountability is not, it doesn't come from a committee. It comes from the systems that are put in place.
Internal.
So, internal checks and balances, right? So it's like, what would need to be in place for the legislature and the executive branch to actually hold themselves accountable? What types of systems, what types of processes, whether it's performance notes, whether it's regular reviews, whether it's the types of things that we're asking for, data, reporting, and policies, and statutes, like there's pieces and parts that need to be put in place for it to actually happen. If we have it all sit in a committee, we'll think that we're accountable because we have a committee to do so. But that's not how it works. It's just like our office, right? We have a chief performance office. It doesn't mean that everyone's performing at 100%, that everyone's super productive in state government.
That's your job.
No, I I do my best. I certainly do my best, right? We provide support, but at the end of the day, people have to implement and do this stuff. It has to be embedded in the data. So that's one thing that's been on my mind about setting up another committee. Like, how would that committee, aside from the work that's laid out for them, how would they make sure that it's being embedded in all of the other processes of the legislature or the executive branch? What's the system that would
How do we embed it?
yes, which some of my points here I was gonna make is, I think it would be good as part of H67 or some other effort to actually go back and evaluate Act 186, 2014. It's been over a decade. It did not
What
achieve.
act was it? Act?
Act 186, the outcomes bill, right? There's a lot of things that are still in play there. The outcomes reporting that we do, the dashboard, we still do that every year, even though those indicators haven't been changed since 2018. GAC was responsible for that. So that's been orphaned for 3 or 4 years now. We continue to produce the report. It was supposed to be used by the legislature, but it fell off the wayside. It doesn't get used.
Well, leadership is the piece that keeps it.
Well, okay, so there's
And
that.
that's what's troublesome. That's why it has to be system and embedded in us.
Yes, right. But we have all these like mechanisms that came out of Act 186. Some of them still exist, some of them don't. I think it would be good to evaluate Act 186, be like, where did we get it right? Where did we get it wrong? What would we want to do moving forward?
Senator Bielski.
I'm sure you know that we did this summer gaps, and we did a little bit of that diving into what worked, what didn't work, and put forward some recommendations that we've, ignored for the last 3 years. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on the recommendations that came from there, and if there's any place in there that might be a good place to just start.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the original recommendations. What I know is that the current version of the bill is quite a deviation from
Well,
what
yes,
the
that's why I
summer
don't
gap
support the current version of the bill.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, it has deviated, where it's like, this is not what the summer gag. Right?
Not even close.
Correct, right? Yeah, and I think, I mean, in terms of the NCSL, like, I love everything that was shared. I look at all of those states, Washington, Pennsylvania, all of them, Utah, to get ideas. But I always think about the size of Vermont and resources that we have in comparison to that. I'm like, it would be really hard to set up systems to do what they're doing. We do some amazing stuff. I will say, like, to your point about what are the other states doing, how does Vermont rank? Like, in terms of the actual data that we put out there and make transparent in terms of programs and performance measures for those programs, there's very few other states that have that much data that's out there. Is our data the best? No. Does it need to be improved? Absolutely. But in terms of the volume and amount of data and the resources that we provide to state staff to develop performance measures, like, we are up there with all of the states.
Senator Clark.
So forgive my ignorance, but so I wanted to actually, as a senator, I have a pretty good notion of what a lot of my constituents think about DCF and where we are with DCF. So is there somewhere I can go and actually get an objective measure on how DCF is doing?
Objective would be the question, right? So
Where, I don't even know where, and granted, I'm not the best at IT in the
Sure.
Senate, but where would I go to find how DCF is doing? I take it this is under your umbrella.
yeah, so DCF would have their own reports that they're providing. They're going to have all of that on their website.
So you'd have to like look at 100 reports to know how they're doing.
But we have so we're calling it the Vermont Performance Report. So we blended the outcomes report, that's part of Act 186, and what used to be the programmatic performance measure budget report, which was originally in Act 186, this pilot program of Department of Finance and Management around performance measurement. We blended those two together into the performance report, and I'll send that link to everybody. That usually comes out in September.
So we should actually have you in every January to tell us how we're doing.
Yes.
Department,
Yeah.
agency by agency, department by department.
So there's over 300 programs at this point in time that are reporting measures. Our recommendation to them is 3 to 5 performance measures per program, spanning quantity measures, quality measures, and results measures. So there are, I forget how many programs are in DCF. There are several programs in DCF that are reporting performance measures of those different buckets. Again, we have lots of work to do. They're doing an audit on the whole like performance measurement piece right now. They've started that, the auditor's office, which is great. But we'll find out, right? Some of the programs are reporting really great measures, and some of them could use some improvement, right?
So for all of you who are going to be here next year, I would say that every one of our committees should start with how are we doing? How are the agencies and departments that we oversee, how are they all doing by these performance measures? No one starts with that.
No,
I mean, I didn't know to start with that. I mean, we get a good sense, but of course, it's the work that we do. But it would be great in the first couple of weeks to actually have you come in and report, particularly if it comes in September. You will have had plenty of time to then be able to report to us in January.
Senator Bielski.
I wonder, and perhaps if that might not be a really great way to start with sort of all legislator briefing each year where actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good idea, or at least embedded in that goal.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, and that would be helpful to me, honestly, because I'm always rattling the cages trying to get people to report. Like, you should have all of your programs reported, right? They don't report all of them.
And if they know it's gonna be reported on
If they know
publicly,
that the legislature is going to ask about it, that provides additional support. Because often people are like, well, the legislative committee is actually looking at any of this data. And I'm like,
well,
don't think so.
this is one of the key issues that I'm trying to get at and figure out how we solve is like, we have it in statute that we can report it, and they're like, no, we don't. Like, yes, you do.
Well, yeah, and the
the
statute
problem
around
is-
this is very bare. Like, again,
Okay.
it's an Act 186 of 2014 that says there shall be a pilot program in the Department of Finance and Management. And the chief performance officer shall report on that. That's it. It talks a little bit about coordination with JFO and the selection of programs.
Okay,
That's all of the meat that's on
so
the
it
bone.
sounds like there might need to be more. Like, that's
Potentially,
there.
yeah, I mean, that's what we've been going on for over a decade now, which is those couple lines of this.
One of the suggestions that was made, I think it came out of a CAC committee meeting, was that every single time a bill is introduced, the committee of jurisdiction will have it in the bill that they will go back, especially if there's an appropriation attached to it, and take a look at how effective that bill it was, whether the law's working, whether it needs to be amended, or whether it needs to be repealed. And that's never happened to my knowledge. Maybe
Yeah.
Tim can help when he gets up later, but to me, that would only make sense. If you're going to appropriate millions of dollars to a particular program and then just say, well, I hope it's working. I have no idea, but I really hope it is. That seems to not be what we should be doing.
Agreed.
It also would make it virtually impossible to do. If, I mean, how many bills are introduced? 1,100 bills every year for that committee of jurisdiction to have to go back each time?
no,
I mean, we
how
don't
they
pass
pass, how they pass,
Right,
not
yeah.
you.
Well, 200 or 300 probably, maybe, somewhere like
Yeah.
that. And then,
Yeah.
but anyway, I just, that point, I remember that because to me, that made a lot of sense that the committee would be responsible for its own work at some point in the
If you
future.
have-
If it's not working, repeal it.
We'd
Yeah.
have to have a little bit more time to actually do that work too, on top of work.
Well,
So, I mean-
that's my,
Yeah.
Well, and
Maybe
that was
we
a
should be
recommendation from
full-time.
Summer DAC as
Okay.
well, was to do that type of review. I think we had tasked it to the newly constituted GAC committee rather than the committee. And then their job was to report the problems
Yes.
to the committees of jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I think also as part of that on the front end, like this concept of performance notes, right, when policy or laws are passed, there would be a set of potential performance measures that you would set out to say, this is how we're going to assess whether or not we're actually having the results we want. Then you could go 5 years later to come back, okay, hopefully we set up the program to collect that actual data so we can compare, did we get what we actually wanted?
But I do think that the full spectrum is important. Is it that we didn't write the law correctly? Is that it's not, the evidence doesn't support that this actually works? Or is it that it wasn't implemented the
Correct,
way
but
we
there's a
intended?
difference, yeah.
Like,
Right.
it can fail in any one of those spaces, and that's one of my challenges with 67 is it focuses narrowly only on the
The evaluation,
legislation
yeah.
and not where did it go wrong?
Yeah. Well, and the other piece, I mean, talking with House Gov Ops, like they had to scope it down pretty narrowly in order to get through, because it's been a struggle for the past 3 years. But evaluation work is really complex and it's time consuming to do it really well. Right.
That's
So,
actually pay for it.
yeah, so like the work that was scoped in here, my comments would be like, it's gonna only be like 1 or 2 things.
Mhm.
Really, that group would be able to
Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah.
If you want to do it really, really well.
Yeah.
It couldn't be 6 things or 8 things. It's just not gonna happen. You gotta do a really deep dive, and then that means you're only looking at a small set of things every single year, which is not quite enough.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge with that one.
well, thank you, Justin. We appreciate you coming in. I
Yeah,
don't know what we're gonna do with the bill. Because again, there's no appropriation for it. So, correct.
yes.
I do have one sort of question to sort of send you away with perhaps, it may not be something you can answer right here in the moment, but thinking about building those systems, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or suggestions about, if not 67, which I actually have some concerns with, and maybe also looking at the summer GAC, if there's things we can pick out that maybe we can do this year to get that ball rolling. And like I said, you may probably can't answer that right this second, but I'd love your input at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the performance notes piece, I think that could be something that could be implemented without any legislative action, right? Because it's just internal process, like to get it to a point where those, or some version of those are actually being used. On the executive branch side, we have the policy impact assessment form that we help develop with the Office of Racial Equity, which folks use when they put together proposals to the governor. So that could be utilized in the legislature as well, or some scoped down version of it that would act as kind of performance notes. I think we used to do training too on results-based accountability. I remember actually doing with Drew Rusley, we did some training. It was years ago for new legislators coming in. Like, we're happy to do that.
Do not do that now as part of the legislature.
Well, we're never asked. No,
Yeah, the Snelling Center does not us.
no. Okay.
So sometimes
we don't.
We have to, you have to insert yourself rather
Yes.
than wait to be asked.
Yeah, because our office isn't really using results-based accountability anymore. We have a different model that's similar, but it allows us to get more operational in nature and more strategic. At some point, I could walk you through some of that, but like our model has changed.
So I appreciate that we could do these things without legislation. My concern is we always could have done those things without legislation and we didn't, which is part of why I've been pushing to actually start moving forward with legislation, creating something that moves us in that direction, because we're not doing it.
Senator Marley.
Sounds like potentially though, you have a ton of data. So we may be doing it in some respect, but we're not putting it together potentially.
Or it's not being used.
Yeah.
Or marketed or shared in whatever capacity we.
Yeah. I think it's to their points, they were talking about all the different like levers that you have for accountability, but you have all of those. I think it's maybe less of a question of what new needs to be developed, more a question of how could we better utilize the things that we've already got? You've got audits that are coming out of, right, the auditor's shop.
Which are great.
You've got resources that we're developing. You've got reports that we're putting out.
It's gonna be so.
Well, yeah. I mean, to the committee's point, I mean, we all have jurisdiction over certain agencies and departments. And do we ever ask at the beginning of the session, how are they performing? I mean, what could we do as part of our work to help make them perform better? I mean, what, other than funding them appropriately?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that in some ways that's up to you to push it a little bit more, be a little more proactive, but it's also up to us to be.
It's gonna be interesting though, like sitting on my morning committee, you know, there's a lot of money associated with health and welfare services. And you're dealing with a lot of different agencies and departments. I imagine probably appropriations wouldn't have any because all the other committees tie into it.
Yeah, but if we
Or
were
maybe
all doing that
appropriations
work,
is the place that it should happen.
Maybe.
Given that they're doling all the money out.
yes, but if we're all doing that of the areas we have jurisdiction over,
See, that's
and then feeding it into them and saying,
what I was thinking.
that's a better delegation of review probably.
Senator Hills.
When original GAC, not summer GAC, existed, did you work directly with that committee? Or is that a committee you sort of, for lack of better terminology, staffed?
Yeah, so we were ad hoc as non-voting members. So
So did you work for Sue before you
I did.
took over?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, Sue didn't leave until like,
2021.
20, I was gonna say.
Yeah, I worked with Sue since, technically 2017.
Oh, I hadn't appreciated that.
Yeah, and I was actually in the office 2019. Yeah. And I saw her the other day.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Tim Ash, the deputy state auditor, will join us now, and always good to see you, sir.
It's great to see all of you.
Good to have you back.
I'm glad to be here. Could you give us some direction, perhaps?
Well, we have sort of conflicting sentiments, frankly. As the
office that is now
Who
valued.
are you for the record?
I think I just said Tim Ash, Deputy State Auditor, but I'll say it again, for the record again. But thank you for making sure, just.
She was worried. She
Well, you
didn't
know,
know.
I'm 71 and I may be deaf, you know?
I can speak more loudly too. We have come in and weighed in on different versions over the last few years of attempts to make progress and make inroads. And I think that probably the last time we went and come into this committee to talk about the specifics of a bill of this nature was a version not unlike the one that was introduced by Senator Bohofsky and I think and others. But and we were enthusiastic because we believe that the legislature itself right now is lacking in that core government oversight function of the executive branch. And I'll come back to where things stand now with the bill that came over and how you might think about it. But we'd like to acknowledge, there's a difference between the executive branch providing transparent information about how it's performing and doing that job really well. There's a difference between that and the legislature overseeing the performance of the executive branch. And there's a lot of crossover and obviously, but they're very different things. Justin, we've come to understand the work of Justin's office much more clearly in recent years. And it is worth noting for a $9.4 billion budget, there is an office with 2 positions, one of which is, I think, being filled. Vacant. Yeah, it's currently vacant. And then in fairness, there has been Drew Rossley's position at AHS, and there's probably a few people sprinkled throughout who are in the program evaluation function, but 9.4 billion with a very small group of people. And one of the things that creates, I think, I'm going to speak about Justin, but not for him. Justin can't compel people to do anything. Mm-hmm. He receives guidance from the Secretary of Administration, generally speaking, about what departments are supposed to be presenting and communicating about how they've been doing. That information is to go to Justin. Justin is to then package it and communicate it to the world, and also provide technical support and training to the agencies to help them do a better job of all that. If an agency does a terrible job, not much Justin can do. If an agency blows it off entirely, not much Justin can do. And so I want to park for a future day the conversation about how you might support Justin's office in a different way moving forward. That's not for this moment. But I think that's worth bearing in mind how little internal kind of coordinated capacity there really is in the executive branch. And that's been true with this governor, previous governor. So it's not a partisan thing. It's just been a function of having very little financial commitment to that self-evaluative function. In terms of, I won't go through the history of GAC. We've talked about all that. It's not, I think we're looking forward. We had been, and I'll speak a little bit about both Doug, the state auditor, and my views, which largely overlap. I think that, when the first attempt to create a legislative management committee or some other form of oversight came up, he said, why aren't all committees just doing this? Very good question. One that has been asked year after year after year, and just hasn't worked. When committees have been told to go forth and be your best selves and do the kind of evaluation, ask the question Senator Clarkson was saying, it just hasn't produced across the board, and it hasn't been consistent. And even when there's been some good faith starter attempts, it usually comes in the form of asking DCF to come in and say, how did you do, DCF? And DCF says, well, here's what we did. Look, and it usually sounds pretty darn good. And then as you get into the leads moving through the session and you start looking at specific programs, you say, wait a sec, the fuel assistance program seems like it hasn't really been putting its back into this effort. Like we should be getting more, or, the issue of foster programs, we're not satisfied there. So that's one of the dilemmas, is then a committee hits that wall and says, geez, we wanted to ask those important kind of oversight questions. And now we just feel like we're getting barraged with information. We don't quite know what to make of it all. And then you have 20 bills that you're trying to work on, you lose steam, you move on. So I think the primary support our office has for what the legislature has been discussing in whatever form is having some dedicated process to start getting a handle on how to make sure that the things that you set in motion, the laws you pass, the appropriations you make, that you're getting what you expected in terms of performance and implementation. So whatever you do to try to make that formalized is a good step in the right direction. The Joint Fiscal Committee as the home of where that might occur. I mean, there's some obvious challenges with that. They're a committee that meets for 4 hours, 5-6 times in the off season. Their schedule is jam packed. I've served on that committee. Others may have as well. You get there and it's like one fast moving thing after the other. And then when you get to about 11:30, you're like, oh, we've got 8 more agenda items, 30 minutes, and everything's just like, circular firing squad. It's like, everyone wants to leave. So is that an ideal location to have the deeper dive conversations that I think the bill envisions? The answer is probably no. However, I would just acknowledge that each year there's been an attempt to do something different. It's failed in recent years for different reasons.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, there's a bit of a chance taking that the committee has to make a decision. Do we take the chance that just moving forward with an approach like this on a time limited basis, we'll learn some lessons, and maybe we'll learn this is the wrong committee to do it, but they did some interesting work, or the staff did some interesting work. Now we just need to find a new home for it. Maybe it's that the staff doing the work on behalf of the Joint Fiscal Committee says, we looked at these 2 or 3 things that we had kind of signature programs we had set loose in the past biennium. And we've got a new framework that we think makes sense anytime we're undertaking a new one. And then they can hand that off. And it can be not unlike what the summer GAC was talking about, kind of building into legislation from the beginning, expectations and report backs and different benchmarks that you hope to meet. So I think the hardest part for the committee is deciding whether to do something or not this year. And if it's something, I think we would encourage that you be on the risk-taking side in the sense of knowing it might not be perfect, but get the best value out of some experimentation so that you can learn from that and move forward. If between the House and the Senate, you can figure out a way to do that like everyone feels pretty good about, that would be excellent, obviously. I think if the conversation is kicked out just a full another year again, it's up to you to determine whether you think that the results will be more successful a year from now than they are right now. And I observed last year, I think there was some legislative hesitance in some quarters because the governor was asked at a press conference about whether he supported the creation of an oversight committee. I don't think he understood that it was not a new committee. It wasn't a new idea that was being presented as a tool to go after his administration or any administration. It was the replacement of something that just hadn't been working right, always with the intent of cutting back of something that was more functional. So, that may come up again, but I think it's worth, and it's lucky that we have people who've served on GAC in the summer committee to know that it is not about any one administration. It's about getting the right oversight moving forward.
Senator Morley.
I don't know where to start. And what I mean by that, you're talking about the Joint Fiscal Committee, you're talking about GAC, you're talking about all this. Do you have any thoughts on where to start?
Well, you have 2 competing ideas right now in terms of how the legislature would create a structured response. One creates no new committee and just creates a process for some additional joint fiscal office resources to do a deep dive on evaluating a handful of things over the course of the next 2 years to see if that creates a sort of a model.
I don't think that works, in my opinion, but
Well, that's what you're the legislator. That's why. But the alternative is something akin to oversight committee that's replicated. It will have to have a charge.
Yeah.
That charge then gets back to your question, where do we start?
Yeah.
Because you can't look at everything in the deep dive, right? You can only choose a subset of things if you're going to really go into that next level. I think there are probably issues that everyone in this room, whether you're a legislator or not, would say, oh, those are the big ticket things that most people would agree. We want to know if it's going well. But that's a process.
so is it kind of like what the gentleman over there said, maybe you want to start small. with one agency and work on that and then start to broaden it out more. Because I'm just scared that if you do a whole bunch right off the bat, it's just gonna seem like it's failed every time.
Well, it's
So-
failed to launch every time.
Yeah.
The committee hasn't been
We've never
created.
actually.
Each
Never done
year,
anything.
each year, there's a discussion and it gets just up to a point and there's some poison pill for different reasons, different years, and it just keeps
Okay,
not quite.
launch it. I think that's a good.
Yeah, Senator Clark.
So we have other successful oversights, do we? Well, I don't know if they're successful, but I know they exist
What are
and they take themselves
Thank you.
very
Thank you.
seriously. Why Justin have a good look at? Here we have, justice oversight. We have whatever the young people,
Child
protection oversight.
Or
We
like the
have,
ombudsman, I mean,
No, there was a
no,
committee.
we're talking
that's
about-
created.
these are legislative
I
committees.
heard, it made me laugh. Whatever the young people.
Well, you know.
Joint IT. Yeah.
Yeah, and in IT, joint IT, we have, I'd say 3 or 4.
How do you measure their success?
I'm getting to that. I'm just saying, we have created such creatures. And again, they are, more or less successful depending on who's leading them at the moment, I think. And depending on how committed that leadership is and how good, quite honestly, the members are. And it all comes down to leadership, I think, in all of this. But I think an oversight committee were one created that could take on the charge. And if we could revisit the original GAC charge, I don't think that oversight committee would be, I think that would be a great thing to create, actually. I think this is a mistake. I've said it from the beginning. I think joint fiscal is not the body to
I don't need.
give this to. I don't think they are necessarily qualified or they don't have the time. Definitely, they don't have the time. So I would wait till next year to create something better that's workable and present it as a proposal for creation as an oversight committee.
Senator Beal?
Well, there's already that proposal. It's on the wall in S324.
Can't we just graph 324 onto this?
We certainly could take aspects of it. I think 324 is everything that the summer GAC suggested. So I think we could potentially pare down and find, and that's sort of what I was trying to get with Justin, and I'll ask you the same question, is when you sort of look at that, where if you were going to pare that down to us one step this year, because we keep saying we'll do it next year. I've now been in the Senate for 4 years and we haven't done it next year. And so
Because we keep wanting you to run again and serve again.
Oh, I have to stay until we're done with accountability. So I will die with this chair. But I wonder if sort of, and I know you worked really closely with us in summer GAC, just sort of thinking about like, if we could take a smaller piece of that, smaller bite, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the joint committee that is focused on specific useful oversight tasks is one that we've been enthusiastic for 4 years. I think the House committee clearly did not create a new committee for a reason. That's for you to figure out with them. And that doesn't mean obviously it's the end of the story. So that's
It's here.
shot at the bill. Lots of things happen. You know how that goes.
Let's put that on the agenda for next week.
But I think the question that you all have to ask is one of the weights, as the chair said, of the early GAC was getting bogged down in terminology, and people felt like, where's the meat? Where's the action? Where are we actually evaluating something and saying, is it doing a good enough job? Do we like what we're seeing? So if the failure in the past few years, sometimes it's been because of the subpoena language, which made people freak out, I think, and think that this was going to be like a witch hunt. Then there was the issue of this would cost a huge ton of money and we need to add all these people. Well, I don't think that has to be the case.
Right.
But so you got to figure that piece out now. Will the legislature agree to put some resources on its own behalf to hold the executive branch accountable? Like that's an important question. And then how do you make sure that it is not a partisan process of picking things because one particular legislature has some beef with a particular governor. Like that's not the goal of it. But you have to make people feel comfortable. That's not what's going to occur. And then I think there has to be an articulated plan for what the first year would look like. What will you actually do with that committee in the first year so that people aren't saying, well, this is going to be out of control, or it's going to die on its own weight because it's too much to take on. And so the New Mexico model that spoke to the Summer GAT committee, why it was so attractive is they said, here are the like signature things we did as a legislature in year X. Each one of them had built in a mechanism that they were going to have to come back to the agencies and speak to this committee and say, did you do the 10 tasks that were supposed to be done by July 1? If not, we want to understand why and tell us how you're going to fix it. Come back 6 months later, where do things stand again, right? So it felt very attractive because it was kind of straightforward. It was clear and replicable. And that, I think, is the key that the committee will have to decide is, do you want to be prescriptive and say, you know what, this committee would do this limited set of things in year one as we figure out and learn as we go, because wordsmithing isn't the solution to this problem. You'll never stop writing the language to make this function be successful. The committee will have to learn as it gets some track record about what was a good use of time, what was not a good use of time. So I guess it's an encouragement not to get too bogged down in the ultra detail, but rather just identify the big ticket things you would like to say a year later and you started to
See that?
unravel it.
So would you be willing to come back next week?
And here as ever, sir.
Well, we're going to discuss 324 on the agenda for.
No, but yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I don't mean to make it sound like it was a total failure. If you looked at the dashboard, let's just take youth smoking, teen cessation from smoking.
Yes.
There's a way to track that every year. And if you pass legislation that makes it harder for that group to be able to purchase that product, and there's a corresponding drop in the usage, you could probably make an argument that that particular bill was working pretty well. It's just a small little teeny example, but we don't do that very often. We don't take a look back at what was the purpose of passing that bill.
And one of the, if I might, I'm glad you used that example because that smoking rates is one of the items that is in the outcomes report.
Yeah.
One of the first things. Our office did an evaluation of the outcomes report to say, like, is it useful to anybody? And the short answer was that it wasn't useful for policymakers at all, in part because the outcomes that were being listed bore very little relation to the work of the agency. So the Department of Labor having an outcome indicator of the unemployment rate, there is almost nothing the state of Vermont is going to do that is going to affect the overall unemployment rate. We track the federal unemployment rate almost perfectly all the time. It doesn't break for like a long, long time, which isn't to say they don't do things that help employees. They do. They help employers as well. It's just that isn't the best way to answer that basic question. Like, are they doing a good job helping the employees in the workforce? So the data on the tobacco, we looked at that and it showed this like up and down over the course of a few years. Well, so I asked the basic question, which was, what's the margin of error? Well, it turned out it was all within the margin of error. So they were saying, look, we did a good job this year, or unfortunately, smoking's up. And then it turned out actually there was no statistical difference. So one of the dilemmas as a committee that has so much on your plate is that evaluating both the clarity, the accuracy, the usefulness of data for just a single thing becomes its own task. So be careful. We are doing an audit. Justin referred to it. We are doing, as Doug enters his final months, one of the things he's kind of looking at these sort of capstone-y concepts. Like, we've looked at all these programs' performance over the years. How do we kind of sum up what we've found in these different areas? We're doing one right now on performance measures across state governments. And it's going to be a deep dive into the extent to which agencies are actually following the guidance that the Secretary of Administration puts out when they say something is an outcome measure to determine whether they're actually delivering a good result. Are they even doing it? Why are some agencies blowing it off? And then we're starting to think, will we then look at the accuracy of the data, not just the.
Well, maybe you'd like to make a
So
recommendation.
we're gonna continue our discussion with them. Yes, one last question.
This enthusiasm, no bottle that up.
I
know,
know
it's
that.
so big and
So the auditor's office seems like a logical partner in this accountability work. And so I guess I'm wondering how some states, their auditor's office actually is who does this work. And so I'm wondering how you see that partnership between the chief performance officer, or whatever we make for legislative and executive branch accountability, and the auditor's office. Because I also know the auditor's office throughout the years has put out some pretty damning audits that were like, that's nice. And we so how
Yeah.
do you envision that partnership?
Well, one thing, just to say about the presentation from NCSL, it didn't speak to this, although they could do this some other time, is auditors in states are set up basically in one of three ways. They either are appointed by governor, they are elected, or they are a legislative function. And so some of the states, the auditor, all they do is things that are directed by the legislature. State of California, almost everything they do is a legislative committee direction. Bill passes saying, do this. Washington, I think you saw that as well.
Yeah.
So we have a different model, which creates a truly independent audit function. And I think that there's a lot of advantages to that. So one thing is that whatever is the result of this dialogue, the auditor's office is a partner in working on that. We have to have our work be independent, but obviously from a sort of technical advising point of view, it makes sense also to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. There's training that could certainly be done using our office working with Justin's, because it's literally Justin with one other person. That other person just went to EDS. So, you know, like it's hard to deal with 8,000 employees. That's just one person. But so the other thing is the legislature rarely consults with the auditor's office proactively to say, you know, we have this concern in this area. Can you do the type of deep dive that we're just not capable of doing? Our staff aren't equipped for that, and we don't have the time for it.
Oh, I thought that was illegal. I thought we weren't allowed to make that as.
I think we
just
can have
after-
them.
No, the legislature could certainly call
Oh.
the auditor, me, and say, hey, you know, have you thought about looking into this? Now, we then have to filter things through a particular set of standards to make decisions about that. But we're always interested in doing things that we know there's a ready and hungry audience for that it would be useful to. So that dialogue can just be enriched for sure. And that will go a long way. And we always can be doing a better job of communicating what we're doing and then harassing you if we don't see you pick up the work we've done and get the, you know.
Well, that alone, I'll just say is helpful because I was always under the impression that the legislative branch was not allowed to request things from the auditor because that would be
It's more of a
barrier.
It's more been a best practice not to.
Okay.
So there are a couple examples, we do sheriff's audits, not because we wake up every day saying of all the priorities doing county sheriff,
But we appreciate it.
but the legislature directed it.
Oh, okay.
We do TIF audits, not because the auditor or the office has a particular passion about TIFs. It's because the legislature requires us to do a series of audits for every TIF district. So there have been instances
Where you've been.
more often, the legislature will say, hey, we're going to do this new undertaking. Can you evaluate it in like 5 years? And then we either say, yeah, we'll do that, or we won't. And the governor also just by statute can request audits.
Okay,
from us, and
maybe
has
that's.
done that in my 5+ years now as the deputy. He's done that on one occasion, which was, if you remember when the 1099s all got people were
Their
receiving
tax
1099s for other people. There were like thousands of them. And so it was a big thing. And the governor asked us as an independent office to go in and try and find out what had actually happened. If you like the conclusion, I have to give you the answer.
Yeah. What
I
was?
see you're trying to move on. I got to give you the answer.
No.
No, the answer was a manual error. Someone on a spreadsheet clicked the wrong button, and that one button, because of the antiquated systems at labor, resulted in a series of not good actions, which resulted in people's, information.
We'll definitely have you back.
All right.
I just want to, and
Hey,
Senator Hardy's got to get back to finance, so.
Yeah, they're talking about the mileage makes user fee.
Yes,
Oh,
so I can get back there about that, so.
Okay.
She was.
I saw your text on her. Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy, and I have an amendment actually to the big bill, which the Appropriations Committee asked me to bring to you all. Because it's in your jurisdiction. It's also in their jurisdiction in that it involves the Pay Act.
But it's nothing to do with it.
No.
No, this is a
Okay.
totally different subject. I think it should be on is it on your website?
Yeah.
So it's an amendment to H 951, which is the big bill, the budget bill. And just a little background, a couple of years ago, you two will recall when we were doing work on sheriff's oversight, and we put in a system in statute about sheriff salaries so that, excuse me, I'm sorry, if a sheriff has only a level 1 certification, their salary would be 20% lower. If they have a level 2 certification, their salary would be 10% lower. They're fully certified, they would get their full salary. And if they are not certified, mainly if they lose their certification for some reason, they would have a 30% salary reduction. And that has been relevant, unfortunately, to a couple instances where sheriffs have lost their law enforcement certification and they've had their salary reduced down to 30%. So this has been in effect for a couple of years for sheriffs. At the same time, we asked for a recommendation from the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs for a similar type of thing for state's attorneys. And you know how, and they don't have the same kind of levels of certification that sheriffs do. So we wanted their recommendation for if a state's attorney loses their law license.
If they were disbarred, basically.
Essentially, or they are, if it's suspended by the Supreme Court, or if they've never gotten a law license. Because as you probably know, these are elected officials. They don't have to have a law license or a law enforcement certification to be elected to these positions. It is, of course, highly problematic if they don't have those certifications or licenses to do these jobs. You can't practice law without a law license. And I would let our legal counsel explain that more than me, but you can't supervise attorneys without a law license. So if you don't have a law license, it's very, very difficult to do the job of state's attorney. We asked for a recommendation from DSAS, and they came back with a recommendation, and I'm sure you could dig it up from somewhere. I didn't have time to find it, but they recommended that if a state's attorney lost their law license, then their salary be docked by 30% as well to make it consistent with the sheriffs. Now, one could argue, and I certainly would, and I know others at this table would too, that maybe 30% is not sufficient.
Yeah.
It should be a lot more than that because you can't really do the job as I just outlined if you don't have your law license. But to be consistent and where we are right now and to not get into the area of removal from office issues, my amendment would just bring into practice the recommendations of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, who I, by the way, talked to about the amendment. So they are aware of it and are supportive of it. But so you can ask them if you want for sure. This would just make an amendment to the budget bill that would put into effect that same 30% for a state's attorney who's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's a fantastic amendment. I think that makes a lot of sense. But my one question is, do they still get their benefits? Because I do think there's something inherently uncool about taking away someone's.
Yeah, they still get their benefits. It's just about their salary.
Okay.
And so it might change the percent. I don't know exactly how the percentage of their.
Benefits were
I
tied to the year, right?
don't know how the health insurance percentage works. I'm not sure if it is, but
It's just an 80-20 split
Okay.
of the premium.
Oh, okay.
so-
The only benefit I could see it possibly having a weigh in on would be the retirement
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking with your, I mean, not to name names, but it seems like there is a specific individual in our state who's struggling with substance misuse disorder. And I would hope that they would still have access to those services, even if they were disbarred.
Yeah, I mean,
So it seems like
they still would have, they would still, whoever it is, would still have access to any of the benefits that they would get right now.
Great.
You can't remove them from office unless we impeach them.
That's
So, yeah, the House could take that up potentially, but we can't. And so this is the most we could do right now until we look at this further, whoever's here next year.
And why does it have to be on the big bill?
That's where the payout. That's where the payout.
Oh, yeah, we,
So it's relevant to the big bill and it's relevant to the stuff that's happening in the outside world right now. So this was just the vehicle that I can find. If you have another vehicle that works, I'm happy to put it somewhere else, but this seemed like,
We are gonna take testimony next week on it. I'll
okay,
have Tim Leaders come in,
okay.
present the state's attorneys.
As long as we,
When do you expect the,
I think the budget is on the floor for second reading on Tuesday.
oh,
And then on third reading on Wednesday. So if you do have Tim in, I would ask that you do it on Tuesday. He may also be willing to just send you a letter about it, but
not the Tim.
it's not the Tim behind me, but the other Tim. There's so many Tims in the world.
There's,
amazing.
that's right now.
okay.
Okay, so as long as we get it in the timeline, and I asked for your support and happy to answer more questions.
But we're not introducing the amendment, you're introducing the.
I'm
amendment.
introducing the amendment, but I think appropriations wanted you guys to sign off on it.
Okay.
I don't think they wanted to, I don't know, I have to check with the chair of appropriations if they want me to come back there after you okay it. So I don't.
How would you feel if we added the attorney general into that?
If the attorney general loses their law license, sure, because they can't, but
they would be fired, they can be fired.
No, they can't. The attorney general is also an elected.
Elected,
constitutional-
correct.
You don't mean like the attorney.
I do.
You don't mean like.
You don't mean the.
in general.
Attorney general.
Oh, you mean like Charity Clark?
Not
No,
no, the position.
Position, not ours.
Anyway, we can discuss it. If you want to take testimony on that, you go ahead and take testimony on it, and then you and I should chat. Okay.
Thank you.
Talk about MBUF. Thanks all. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All cars, all.
It's the what?
The part about the attorney general, that's the call more plan.
Yeah, they call it. We'll call it that. Okay, bye guys.
Just a
Have a
question.
great weekend.
To me, if you're gonna do state's attorneys, why not do the attorney general?
Yes, I misunderstood you. When I think state's attorneys, I literally think about like her staff. But you're thinking the actual person in,
I mean, it's a parallel sort of
It
construct
is.
where it's
It
a
is.
constitutional officer that is elected to oversee other attorneys
Correct.
that have no requirement to be an attorney.
Correct.
No,
Like,
I
it makes perfect sense
Yeah.
for you to include it.
yeah.
Just a question.
No,
And I
oh,
didn't
the
agree.
agreement. Oh,
It was that.
the agreement.
Yeah, we're ready.
I didn't realize that I thought finance was gonna hold on to that for at least one day. I didn't think it would come.
No, it's on notice
Yeah, it is on notice.
Yeah.
Okay,
for second reading.
well, we'll have to move a little more quickly than I thought. So if we can have Tim Leaders come in on Tuesday.
Or
Annie and Sullivan.
chat with
He's my
leadership to
state
see if they'll pause for a moment.
Well, boy, it's like holding up the Grand Central train for. Okay, anyway. Okay, well, we'll definitely have Tim Ash back. That can be later in the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. I'm trying to think of anything else that's come up. S-89, which is the survivor benefit bill, got amended on the House floor by adding a provision that would allow the state treasurer, maybe not allow, would require the state treasurer to, if there's a claim, if there's a death and there's a claim, to verify that that claim is legitimate. I don't know how else to phrase it. They'll probably have to have a medical professional come in and so we have to either concur or not, send it back with a further proposal of amendment. But we can't get Senator or Representative Burrows in until Tuesday. So I'm gonna ask that we pass over it on Tuesday. We may not get to it anyway, because it's the last item on the notice.
You're not gonna get.
So my,
Already talked.
Oh,
My understanding of the amendment is it's what we had sort of started to talk about in here, if there needs to be some sort of investigation. And the treasurer's office said, well, we have to hire someone for that, and this is telling them they can use the fund to hire for that if they need to. So it's sort of the fix to the thing that we sent it over to them to fix.
okay.
So I feel fairly comfortable.
Yeah, I haven't read, it's a rather long amendment, so I want to make sure that we each have a chance to read it over and understand. That's all. Okay. Anything else for the committee to take up today? Thank you, Tim, for being with us. All right, well, have a great weekend, and we'll adjourn for the day and the week and see all of you on Tuesday.